Duncan McNabb here, and in a break from murder and mayhem, an old-fashioned heist story, this time gold and cash. I'm fascinated by these stories. I find them very, very tasty because they require insider information to get the plan started. They require meticulous planning and logistics management, trucks, forged documents, tools, and so on. They also require planning if you're a smart crook, and some of them aren't. Smart crooks always plan their exit, so to avoid things like CCTV that will follow them back to their criminal lair, or things like bumping into coppers, security guards, or innocent bystanders. You also need to plan what you're going to do with the stuff. There is nothing more embarrassing for criminals than to have a successful heist and then to be sitting back at their criminal lair wondering what the hell they're going to do with what they've got. This happens not infrequently and quite often in art thefts, for example. Now, these guys were quite smart. They'd stolen substantially gold, which I'm told can be melted down in, quote, a robust domestic microwave oven. But given the amount they had, you'd need quite a few of those. So what they had sensibly done was got themselves a small factory to change the gold into, in this case, jewellery, and also to make sure that there is no identifying marks anywhere. So gold melted down, serial numbers gone, jewellery ensues. Now, the case got underway on the 17th of April 2023 when Air Canada Flight 881, a Boeing 777 daily scheduled service from Zurich to Toronto. In the cargo hold of that passenger aircraft was a box from Brinks Security, the big global security firm. Inside that container was around about 400 kilograms of gold, 6,600 ingots, all with serial numbers, worth around about 20 million Canadian dollars. Also, there were 2.5 million Canadian dollars worth of various foreign currencies all being shipped. Now, these shipments happen all the time around the world. It is common rather than uncommon, and they're just innocuously in the cargo hold of a plane. Now, the Air Canada flight arrived at Pearson at around about just about 4 o'clock on the 17th. Passengers are unloaded, cargo is unloaded, and by just on 6 o'clock that night, the Brinks container is sitting in the air cargo bay waiting for collection. Half an hour later, an innocuous-looking white 5-ton van, you can't get any blander than that, turns up, and the bloke driving has documentation which entitles him to pick up the container and drive off. All looking good so far. What most didn't realise that the documentation was in fact forged, and had the base document from which the forgery was created was an Air Canada bill from the day before for a load of seafood, so some might unkindly suggest something was a bit fishy. Anyway, the documentation was competent, passed muster. The container is later on the back of the truck, which then drives off into the deepening Toronto night. Motors down a highway till it gets to a town, I think, called Milton, about 35 kilometres southwest of Pearson Airport, where it heads off up a rural road and disappears completely. Now, it had been tracked on CCTV from the airport, from the highways, from various businesses where it sort of triggered a camera. But when it hit the rural road, it just disappeared into the darkness. About a couple of hours later that night, back at the airport, the genuine Brinks van arrives with the genuine Brinks documentation to help them get the container into the back. They look around. They search, and the container is obviously gone. The bay in which it's kept is torn apart. They look for everywhere. They can't find it. They're getting frantic, very red faces. By 3 a.m, they realised that they had to call the cops, which they did. The police arrive and the investigation starts. Now, the local police are describing it as the biggest gold heist in Canada's history, which is probably pretty much on the money. While the CCTV takes them to pretty much a dead end, there was one stroke of luck. Criminals almost always make one fatal mistake. And in this case, the criminals did. The driver, who'd done a pretty good job so far, had done one stupid thing. He had removed his gloves while signing off the documentation and had left his fingerprint back at the site of the heist. The police found the fingerprint and he identified him as a gentleman called Durante King-McLean. Now, all of a sudden, suspect number one in the biggest gold heist, they're scouring Canada for him, and they're trying to go through the puzzle that is an investigation. All investigations are pretty much the same. It's like a big jigsaw puzzle thrown on the table, and piece by piece by piece, you've put it together until you finally get the bingo moment where everyone gets arrested. That's still in progress, but Mr. Durante McLean couldn't be found anywhere until September of 2023, almost 6 months later, when he is motoring in a rental car through Pennsylvania in the United States. He's wheeled over in a routine traffic stop. The cops have a look in the boot of his rental car, and eureka, they find around about 65 firearms. Included in those firearms are some guns that have been modified for fully automatic fire, which is quite terrifying. They also find something called ghost guns, which are guns cobbled up from various components, ordered separately, usually on the internet, put together. They are no serial numbers, utterly untraceable, and very fashionable in gangland at the moment. Now, Canada doesn't have a gun culture like the US, but it does have a lot of organised crime gangs, various mafia affiliates, outlaw motorcycle gangs and so on. So guns are needed in Canada. So there's a very vigorous market across the border. And police believe, and yet to prove, but they believe that some of the proceeds from the gold and cash heist have gone to fund firearm trafficking deals. Now, Mr. King McLean is still in the US. The Canadians would like to extradite him very quickly, but their investigations continued after this arrest, and in the end of April this year, they've announced that they have found and arrested, I think, 7 co-conspirators, including a couple of Air Canada employees at the time. They have also got a couple that they're still searching Canada for. But there's a problem with it all. The investigation is actually going quite well, but the only problem they do have is that they haven't recovered very much of the $22.5 million worth of booty. In fact, whilst they were happily announcing, and quite reasonably announcing, that they'd made multiple arrests and that they'd executed 37 search warrants, the downside is that they found gold to the value of $89,000 in the form of jewellery, and they found $430,000 in cash. Now, this may have been from the original theft, or it may have been proceeds of crime as well. We don't know at this stage. The matter is still before the court in Canada. They still hope to arrest the balance of the gang fairly soon, so I'll update you when we hear more about this very tasty little story. Thank you.